pressure, despite all the backlash, the opposition here at home, you've got to give Theresa May some credit. She has actually struck a deal with the EU.
But this is only really a deal for the transition period going out to the end of 2020, and beyond that there's still enormous uncertainty. And of course it means the main benefits of Brexit won't be forthcoming for another almost 3 years, so consumers will still be paying rip-off prices in the shops due to EU tariffs, and businesses will be suffocated by hugely expensive EU red tape. Even beyond that, it looks like Brexit in name only is the most likely outcome.
Yeah, which is better than a no-deal situation, isn't it?
I disagree. I think obviously there will be a few tricky weeks after no deal, but then of course it will be short-term pain for long-term gain, because then you could deliver these really big benefits from the deregulation and freer trade with the rest of the world.
And yet the IMF coming out yesterday with headlines saying 8% hit on Britain's economy in the event of a no deal.
Well, I think we all know how accurate some of these forecasts are from these economic groups. And of course, this is one of these supranational organisations that in the long run has been very closely linked to the EU, is really in bed with the same sort of Davos elite.
But surely the EU itself doesn't want a no-deal situation, and in some ways, because of all this arm twisting, pushing Theresa May into a corner, making sure, and some indeed even gloating over the fact we still have control over the UK, in some ways they've shot themselves in the foot now, because they are facing a no-deal situation and maybe a change of Prime Minister here in Britain, which is not what they want.
That's certainly possible. They could have been sort of too clever by half here, and of course there are huge exports from EU countries to the UK, and if we did have freer trade, then a lot of UK consumers would choose to buy much cheaper goods from the rest of the world rather than paying for overpriced EU goods. So of course these rigged trade patterns could deteriorate very rapidly, and that would be bad news in the short run for EU economies.
And talking about the economy at the moment, obviously it is suffering very badly over this uncertainty. The deal itself, if we have this extended transition period and of course this backstop and insurance policy, because this is all about the withdrawal agreement at the moment, all theoretical, isn't it, at the moment, because of course the next big step is that important trade deal. So it's so much perhaps being overdone at this stage, so much at stake, when actually what is really important is that future trade deal.
I think that's right, and the problem is by sort of kicking these problems off into the long grass is actually just extending the period of uncertainty for business, which will in turn deter long-term investment. So that's why I think in a lot of ways it would be better to get it over with quickly with a short, sharp shock, and then businesses could get some continuity after that.
Get it over and done with, but yeah. We don't quite know how that's going to happen now. Should the people actually now have a say on this? There seems to be really a big consensus for that, and particularly from a business point of view, businesses should have a say now, don't they?
Well, I think the problem with this idea of a second referendum is that it's like the farce we had in France and Ireland and the Netherlands, where basically the establishment forces the voters to vote over and over again until they give the answer that the EU elite wants. I mean, that just makes a mockery of democracy, really. We did have a people's vote back in 2016. As far as businesses are concerned, I think the problem is some of the big businesses have really managed to nobble ministers, and it's typical that the politicians put the interest of these vested interests above the general public.
Oh, yeah, and talking about the politicians, all this perhaps this a chance of a leadership challenge, really a change of Prime Minister at this stage. What good would that actually do? Certainly that isn't what businesses would want.
Well, that's the problem the Eurosceptics have because of the parliamentary arithmetic. So probably roughly 400 out of the 650 MPs are Europhile Blairites, including a big chunk of the Conservative Party. So, how on earth are they going to get their way when they're faced with that kind of obstacle in Parliament?